Lawman wasn't just another Western in the dying days of the genre. It was a blood-soaked meditation on obsession and justice gone wrong, a film where its British director nearly got stabbed to death for relieving himself, where Hollywood legends fought over billing and horse killings, where a production became a battleground between old-school Western mythology and the brutal cynicism of the 1970s. What audiences saw in 1971 was a relentless, unforgiving story of a marshal who couldn't let go. What they didn't know was that behind the camera, egos clashed, legends made their final stands, and one director's arrogance in a foreign country almost ended in tragedy. This is the full story of Lawman, a forgotten masterpiece that dared to ask, what happens when the law becomes indistinguishable from revenge? Here are 15 facts about the Western that killed the Western, and stick around for a bonus fact about the alternate ending that could have saved it from obscurity. Number 15. Michael Winner's near-death bathroom break. British director Michael Winner came to Mexico to make his first American Western and nearly left in a body bag over a bathroom break. During location shooting in Durango, Winner needed to urinate and, finding no facilities, relieved himself against a wall near the set. He didn't realize this was considered a grave insult in Mexican culture. A Mexican crew member, enraged, pulled out a large knife and advanced on the director. Winner froze in terror. The situation was only diffused when Robert Duvall intervened, stepping between them and calming the man down in Spanish, explaining Winner was an ignorant foreigner who meant no disrespect. Winner later wrote he genuinely believed he was about to be killed over taking a piss. The incident taught him about cultural sensitivity and the importance of asking where the bathroom was. For the rest of the shoot, Winner was noticeably more careful around the Mexican crew. Number 14. The location war with Howard Hawks. Before Michael Winner could start filming, he had to win a battle with one of Hollywood's greatest directors. Winner wanted to shoot in Durango, Mexico, but Howard Hawks was already there shooting Rio Lobo with John Wayne, and Hawks had essentially claimed the entire town. Hawks didn't appreciate some upstart British director trying to muscle in. Winner refused to budge. The two directors engaged in a tense standoff, with Hawks attempting to use his influence to push Winner out, but Winner had United Artists backing him. Eventually, an uneasy truce was established. Both productions would share Durango, but coordinate schedules to avoid the same sets simultaneously. Neither director would speak directly to the other. Crew members working both productions reported constant bad-mouthing. Winner got his location, but at the cost of making an enemy of one of cinema's titans. Number 13. Burt Lancaster's billing tantrum. Burt Lancaster was one of Hollywood's biggest stars when he signed on as Marshal Jered Maddox. He was also one of Hollywood's most difficult when it came to billing. Lancaster's contract stated his name would appear first in all credits and advertising, but when promotional material circulated, Lancaster noticed Robert Ryan's name appearing first in some international markets. Lancaster immediately contacted lawyers and demanded United Artists fix the breach of contract. The studio explained different markets had different star preferences. Lancaster didn't care. He threatened legal action and refused promotional activities until every piece of marketing showed his name first. The dispute delayed the film's release in several markets and cost thousands in reprinting. Winner was disgusted by what he saw as petty Hollywood vanity. The irony was bitter. Lancaster fought for top billing on a film that would be forgotten within a decade. Number 12. Lee J. Cobb's 2P Rebellion. Lee J. Cobb had worn a toupee in virtually every film and television appearance for over 2 decades. His hairpiece was as much a part of his professional identity as his distinctive voice. But when he arrived on the set of Lawman to play cattle baron Vincent Bronson, Cobb made an unexpected decision. He was going to play the role bald. Michael Winner was initially skeptical, worried that Cobb's baldness might be distracting or make the character look too old and frail. But Cobb insisted that a powerful Western cattle baron wouldn't be vain about his appearance. He'd wear his baldness as a badge of masculinity and authority. Winner agreed to shoot a test, and when he saw the footage, he was convinced. Cobb's bald head gave Bronson a brutal, intimidating presence that the toupee would have softened. For many cast and crew members, this was the first time they'd ever seen Cobb without his hairpiece, and it was genuinely startling. The actor looked simultaneously more vulnerable and more dangerous. Cobb's decision to go bald wasn't just a character choice, it was a statement about authenticity in Western filmmaking. He was stripping away Hollywood vanity to reveal something raw and more honest. Winner later called it one of the gutsiest decisions by an actor I ever witnessed. Number 11. The argument over shooting the horse. One of Lawman's most controversial scenes depicts a horse being shot during a violent confrontation. Michael Winner wanted it brutal and shocking, but several cast members, particularly those with ranching backgrounds, were deeply opposed. They argued that shooting a horse on screen would alienate Western audiences who respected horses as noble animals, not violence props. Winner dismissed these concerns as sentimental nonsense, insisting his vision of the West showed violence was indiscriminate. The argument became heated, with voices raised and accusations thrown. Burt Lancaster sided with Winner, arguing the scene showed moral bankruptcy. Robert Ryan was reportedly uncomfortable but stayed silent. The scene was filmed as Winner intended, using special effects and careful angles. When released, several critics cited the horse shooting as evidence of excessive brutality. Winner considered it a triumph. Number 10. Robert Ryan's last ride into the sunset. Lawman marked Robert Ryan's final appearance in a Western, the genre that had defined much of his career. Ryan, who had appeared in classic Westerns like The Naked Spur and The Professionals, was 62 years old during filming and visibly aging. He moved more slowly than in his younger days, his face deeply lined by decades of hard living and hard roles. Michael Winner noticed that Ryan seemed melancholic on set, often sitting alone between takes staring out at the Durango landscape. When Winner asked if something was wrong, Ryan reportedly said, "I'm just trying to remember it all. This is probably the last time I'll ever be on a horse for a film." Ryan was right. After Lawman, he would make only a handful more films before his death from cancer in 1973 at age 63. There's a haunting quality to Ryan's performance as Cotton Ryan, the character shared his surname, a lawman who's weary of violence but unable to escape it. It's almost as if Ryan was playing himself an actor, tired of the roles he'd been typecast in but unable to break free from them. Winner later reflected that Ryan brought a profound sadness to the role that couldn't have been scripted or directed. It was the sadness of a man who knew he was playing his final hand. Number 9. The Man with the Gun connection nobody noticed. Lawman's plot bears a striking resemblance to The Man with the Gun, a 1955 Western starring Robert Mitchum. In both films, a town marshal arrives to bring violent men to justice, faces resistance from local power structures, and refuses to compromise. The similarities are so pronounced that some historians speculate Lawman was an unofficial remake. However, neither Michael Winner nor screenwriter Gerald Wilson ever acknowledged this publicly. When asked about influences, Winner cited High Noon and The Wild Bunch, but never mentioned The Man with the Gun. Wilson may have been inspired but chose not to credit it to avoid legal complications. What's interesting is that The Man with the Gun was itself a forgotten Western by 1971. If Lawman was borrowing from it, Winner was stealing from obscurity, remaking a film nobody remembered. Number 8. Robert Duvall, 1 year before immortality. When Robert Duvall appeared in Lawman as the hot-headed Vernon Adams, he was a respected character actor, but far from a household name. He'd had memorable roles in To Kill a Mockingbird and True Grit, but he was still taking supporting parts wherever he could get them. What Duvall didn't know during the Durango shoot was that Francis Ford Coppola was preparing The Godfather and had already decided to cast him as Tom Hagen, the role that would make him a star and earn him his first Academy Award nomination. Lawman would be released in 1971, just months before The Godfather transformed Duvall's career forever. Watching Lawman now, there's a strange temporal dissonance. This is Duvall, in the last moments before superstardom, still grinding it out in mid-budget westerns, still taking fourth billing behind Lancaster, Ryan, and Cobb. Michael Winner later claimed that he discovered Duvall's talent during Lawman and recommended him for bigger roles, but this is almost certainly an exaggeration of Winner's influence. What is true is that Duvall gave Lawman everything he had, delivering a performance of coiled menace and desperate bravado that hinted at the greatness to come. Within a year, he'd be sitting across from Marlon Brando in one of cinema's greatest films. But in Durango, he was just another working actor, saving a British director from a knife-wielding crew member. Number 7. Joseph Wiseman's return from Bond villainy. Joseph Wiseman, who played the town doctor in Lawman, was best known for playing Dr. No in the first James Bond film 9 years earlier. By 1971, Wiseman had largely retreated from film work, focusing primarily on theater. His appearance in Lawman was something of a surprise, a prestigious stage actor taking a small role in a Western. Winner cast Wiseman because he wanted the doctor to have an air of educated sophistication that would contrast with the rough violence of the frontier town. Wiseman brought exactly that, playing the doctor as a man disgusted by the brutality around him but powerless to stop it. What's fascinating is how Wiseman's Bond villainy informed his Western role. There's a cold, analytical quality to his doctor, an almost scientific detachment from the carnage. He treats wounds with the same clinical precision that Dr. No used to plan world domination. For Bond fans watching Lawman, Seeing the franchise's first villain playing a small-town doctor must have been jarring. Wiseman himself reportedly found the Western genre beneath his talents and was only on set for a few days before returning to New York and the theater world he preferred. Winner later said Wiseman was totally professional but clearly didn't want to be there. Number 6. John Wayne's Pool House and the Winner Connection. Michael Winner's connection to John Wayne played an unexpected role in Lawman's production. Winner had met Wayne socially and attended parties at Wayne's house, including gatherings at Wayne's Western-themed pool house complete with saddles as bar stools. Wayne had no interest in appearing in Lawman. He was busy shooting Rio Lobo with Howard Hawks in the same Durango location. Besides, the script's moral ambiguity was antithetical to Wayne's heroic persona. Winner claimed Wayne told him, "Mike, you're making a Western where nobody wins. That's not a Western, that's a funeral." Wayne's assessment was shrewd. Lawman was a funeral for the traditional Western, for simple heroism, for the myths Wayne embodied. Wayne and Hawks represented the old guard, Winner the new cynicism. Winner used his Wayne connection in publicity. Wayne never saw Lawman and never commented on it publicly. Number 5. The stunt double's hair problem. Robert Duvall's character required several action sequences, including a dramatic death scene that involved stunt work. The production hired a professional stunt double to perform the dangerous falls and physical action. There was just one problem. Robert Duvall was almost completely bald at this point in his life, and his stunt double had a full head of thick hair. Rather than shaving the stunt double's head, which would have limited his ability to work on other productions, the solution was to have the stunt double wear a bald cap for the action sequences. This created a continuity nightmare in close-ups and medium shots. Duvall's actual baldness was clearly visible, but in the wide shots with the stunt double, the bald cap looked obviously fake under the harsh Mexican sunlight, creating a slightly different texture and sheen. Editor Hugh Radgett had to carefully select angles and cut quickly during action sequences to minimize the visibility of this discrepancy. Most audiences never noticed, but if you watch the film carefully, there are moments where Duvall's baldness looks subtly different from shot to shot. Winner was reportedly frustrated by this technical limitation, but acknowledged there was no perfect solution. The bald cap incident became something of a running joke on set, with crew members teasing the stunt double about his expensive fake baldness. Number 4. The critical divide between America and Europe. When Lawman was released in 1971, it received dramatically different receptions in America versus Europe, revealing a fundamental cultural split in how the Western genre was perceived. American critics were largely dismissive, viewing the film as unnecessarily grim, excessively violent, and a betrayal of Western traditions. Roger Ebert gave it a lukewarm review, calling it competent but depressing. Variety complained about its relentless negativity and predicted it would struggle at the box office. They were right. American audiences stayed away in droves, put off by the film's bleak worldview and lack of heroic resolution. However, European critics, particularly in France and Britain, embraced Lawman as a masterpiece of revisionist Western filmmaking. French critics compared it favorably to Sergio Leone's work, praising its deconstruction of American mythology. British critics appreciated Winner's outsider perspective, suggesting that it took a British director to see through the lies of the American frontier. The European critical embrace couldn't save the film's commercial fortunes, but it did establish Lawman as something of a cult classic in international film circles. This transatlantic divide reflected larger cultural debates about America. In the early 1970s, Europeans saw American mythmaking as fraudulent, while Americans weren't ready to abandon their foundational stories. Winner, caught in the middle, couldn't satisfy either audience completely. Number 3. The film that killed United Artists' Western division. Lawman's box office failure had consequences beyond just this one production. United Artists had invested heavily in prestige westerns in the late 1960s and early 1970s, hoping to capitalize on the revisionist trend started by The Wild Bunch and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But by 1971, the western was dying as a commercial genre. Lawman, along with several other expensive western flops that year, convinced United Artists executives to shut down their western production division entirely. The decision was made in late 1971, just months after Lawman's disappointing theatrical run. Dozens of western scripts in development were immediately canceled. Directors and producers who specialized in westerns found themselves without studio support. The genre that had defined American cinema for over half a century was being officially abandoned by a major studio. Lawman wasn't solely responsible for this decision, but it was cited in internal United Artists memos as evidence that audiences no longer wanted westerns, even with major stars like Lancaster and Ryan. Michael Winner later reflected that he'd inadvertently participated in killing the genre he'd set out to honor. The irony was brutal. In making a western about the death of the frontier, Winner had helped kill the western itself. Number 2. Burt Lancaster's obsessive character preparation. Burt Lancaster was notorious for his intense physical preparation for roles, and Lawman was no exception. Despite being 57 years old during production, Lancaster insisted on doing as many of his own stunts as the insurance company would allow. He spent weeks before filming practicing quick-draw techniques with real firearms, working with the film's weapons master to achieve the fast, fluid gun handling his character required. Lancaster also studied historical accounts of frontier marshals, reading everything he could find about famous lawmen like Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok, looking for behavioral details he could incorporate. He was particularly interested in how these men walked, how they carried themselves with the authority of their position. Lancaster developed a specific gait for Jered Maddox, a slow, deliberate stride that suggested a man who never hurried because he never doubted his ultimate victory. Michael Winner initially found Lancaster's preparation excessive and told him to just play it tough. But when Winner saw the footage, he had to admit that Lancaster's physicality gave Maddox an intimidating presence that couldn't have been achieved through acting alone. Lancaster's commitment extended to the harsh shooting conditions. He refused special treatment, enduring the same heat, dust, and discomfort as the rest of the cast. His dedication earned him respect from the crew, even as his billing tantrums alienated the front office. Number 1. The alternate ending that never was. The ending of Lawman as released is unrelentingly bleak. Maddox achieves his mission, but at tremendous human cost, leaving him a hollow victor in a meaningless war. But this wasn't the only ending filmed. Michael Winner shot an alternate conclusion where Maddox, after the final shootout, has a moment of recognition about the futility of his quest. In this version, he removes his marshal's badge and drops it in the dust before writing away a symbolic rejection of the law he'd served so obsessively. This ending was considered too ambiguous by United Artists executives who worried it would confuse audiences about whether Maddox was a hero or a villain. They pressured Winner to use the current ending, which leaves Maddox's psychology more opaque but his actions more clearly defined. Winner complied, but he later said the alternate ending was more honest and better reflected the film's themes. The alternate ending footage still exists in the United Artists archives, but has never been released publicly. Some film scholars who've seen it argue it would have made Lawman a more complete and satisfying film, while others believe it would have been too on the nose, making explicit what was more powerful when left implicit. Winner himself went back and forth, sometimes defending the theatrical ending and sometimes regretting his decision to change it. The badge in the dust remains one of cinema's most famous unseen images. Bonus fact: the GP rating that killed its audience. Lawman was released with a GP rating, the equivalent of today's PG, indicating parental guidance suggested. This rating was a catastrophic miscalculation that damaged the film's commercial prospects. The GP rating suggested a family-friendly Western in the tradition of John Wayne's films, but Lawman was anything but family-friendly. It was violent, morally complex, and deeply cynical about American frontier mythology. Parents who brought their children expecting a traditional Western were horrified by the film's brutality and moral ambiguity. Conversely, adult audiences seeking a mature, revisionist Western were put off by the GP rating, assuming it meant the film had been watered down for younger viewers. The rating satisfied no one and actively misrepresented the film's content. Michael Winner blamed United Artists for pushing for the GP rating to maximize the potential audience, while the studio blamed Winner for not making his intentions clear during production. The truth was probably somewhere in between. Winner had made a hard R Western but was seduced by the promise of a larger audience if he could keep the rating down. He trimmed some violence and profanity to achieve GP, but the fundamental nature of the film remained dark and adult. The mismatched rating became a case study in how not to market a film, a cautionary tale that film students still study today. Lawman deserved an R rating. It deserved an adult audience. Instead, it got a rating that pleased no one and helped condemn it to obscurity. Lawman endures not as a forgotten failure, but as a necessary film, a brutal dismantling of Western mythology that arrived just as America needed to question its foundational stories. It's a film born from cultural collision, a British director bringing European cynicism to American myth-making, old Hollywood legends making their final stands, a genre dying in real time as the cameras rolled. Every frame carries the weight of endings, the end of the frontier, the end of simple heroism, the end of the Western itself as a viable commercial genre. Michael Winner set out to make a Western about obsession and found himself obsessed with destroying every comfortable lie the Western had ever told. The lesson of Lawman is harsh but true. Sometimes the only honest ending is the one where nobody wins. And in 1971, in the dust and heat of Durango, that's exactly the ending Winner delivered, whether audiences wanted it or not.